Die klankbaan van jou lewensreis.
Isandi sobomi bakho.
Kingfisher FM.
The Department of Basic Education has outsourced their policy making on early childhood education to a Belgian LGBTQ organisation. The new policy they propose would encourage gender confusion and behaviour in preschool and primary school children. We need to be aware of what's happening in our legislature that will impact our children. I'm chatting to Philip Rosenthal, the head of the Christian View Network, who is advocating on the front line. Philip, welcome to Kingfisher FM.
Hi there.
So good to have you with us. Let's kick off with, what is the agenda of the Department of Basic Education when it comes to this gender responsive ideology that our listeners need to be aware of?
Okay, well, I think they've been pushing an LGBT agenda for a number of years, but now they are proposing to extend this to pre-primary education and primary education, which is, I think, an age where children are not ready to be even prepared for this by their parents, let alone defend themselves against it. And essentially included in this new toolkit policy, which they've just prepared for circulation to these teachers who will be teaching your child, they are proposing to argue that there's a continuum of gender and sex, so that there's not just male and female, but there's all sorts of other things in between.
Yeah.
And any sort of gender stereotypes or roles are wrong, even encouraging children to question the gender roles of their own parents.
Sure.
And they're opposing toilet segregation by sex, to rather say, well, children should just be allowed to use whichever bathroom that they identify with.
Yeah.
And to me, that's hazardous for the safety of the children, amongst other things. And they also say, for example, they argue that they should encourage, the teacher must encourage the child to explore gender non-conforming roles and discourage peers who make negative comments. So in other words, they encouraging boys to dress up like girls and play with dolls, and the reverse as well.
Yes.
And I think that this is really an enormous intrusion into of pushing an ideology which parents don't want. And to me, it's also scandalous that they outsourced their own policy making, not even to South Africans, but to a foreign activist organization.
Yeah. So the Department of Education has put out a press release, which you shared on your network, and I took just one little extract of that. Is to be clear, the gender responsive pedagogy toolkit is for early childhood education. It's not aimed at dividing children from their parents or undermining family values, but clearly that's not the case.
No, well, they're putting spin on it. I think that what's equally scandalous is that the actual person who issued this press release, Elijah Mhlanga, is the same person who posted on social media some pornographic pictures of women reading books, and he argued that this was encouraging children to read. We demanded a number of years ago that he should be fired for doing this.
Yes.
They still put this out, and now he shamelessly continues and says he's not undermining family values. But I think the truth is that he has a different idea about what family values are to what we believe, and just about all of the religious institutional bodies in this country have written to the Department of Education objecting to this policy, and this is what led to this press release. And I think that we have a parallel situation where we have a student who is on trial at Northwest University for objecting to this kind of policy at that university being pushed on the students. But now we have the proposal to push this onto pre-primary school children. So that's a point that I think really parents need to wake up and realize that they're facing something dangerous.
Very. I think, Philip, that's the challenge for us in the media space, is to actually broadcast what's really happening on the ground when it comes to the agenda of some of these organizations and, of course, our government itself.
Yeah, well, I think that something which parents need to be concerned about is that we know in foreign countries where this agenda has been pushed, the rate of gender dysphoria, which is children who think that they are the wrong gender and want to dress inappropriately has risen from 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 50. Now that is 1,000 times increase.
Sure.
So they say that they are just helping the children to find their true identity, but the reality is when you have 1,000 times increase, they are trying to confuse these children, and they're being quite successful at this. And I think that some parents who have not woken up to this have been quite shocked to suddenly be approached by their own child and said, well, you know, Daddy, I've decided that I'm going to become a boy, and this other NGO is going to help me to sue you, so you better not try and stop me. And then you have a school counselor, psychologist, or the headmaster supporting this, because anybody who disagrees with this ideology is attacked, and they attempt to intimidate them. So you have people who are both confused and people who are intimidated.
It's crazy. So, Philip, what is it that our listeners can do? Our communities, obviously our churches as well. You know, I think when you sit and listen to a conversation like this, you feel a little helpless, like, oh my goodness, where do we even start with this? Well, what would you say?
I think that the first thing to do is to respond to the spokesperson of the Minister of Education, who's Hope Mokgatlhe. Her number is 079-817-0427. That's on the press release.
Yes.
And you can phone her up and say, well, I object to this. Please withdraw your policy. You don't have permission to do that to my child. But if they persist with this, then I think every parent needs to speak to their school's own teacher and say, well, you don't have permission to do this with my child.
Yeah.
And then hopefully the teachers won't implement this, but if they do, to move the child to another school which won't implement it.
Right.
I think possibly when you're dealing with high school children, you can prepare them for this sort of thing. But to me, junior school children should be innocent and shouldn't have to even know about this kind of nonsense.
Yeah. And I think, Philip, I have a daughter who's just started high school this year. It felt a little bit like I was throwing her out to the wolves saying, go baby, you go and be you. So it's actually very real, because what I've had to do is have conversations that I never dreamt of having with my children as a result of what we're exposed to in the world. And it's very challenging.
Yeah, no, and the thing is that I think that when our generation was at school, we had problems of naughty children or bad things or influences that could maybe come into the school from certain avenues, but the school itself would be and the government itself would be opposed to these problems.
Yes.
But now we have actually the government and in many cases the schools and the school psychologists not taking the same side as the parents, but actually encouraging this sort of confused and dysfunctional behavior. And the good news is that overseas the tide is turning, because I think most people have realized that this is causing harm and that these people have gone far beyond what they claim to be doing in terms of tolerance or anything like that. And so many governments are actually and institutions and healthcare groups are advising, no, this is actually harmful to children. The Swedish government, the British Health Department is starting to advise that this is harmful behavior. But I think that the ship turns slowly, and we possibly are going to have to be fighting this for several years in South Africa before we bring the government to their senses.
Yeah. Well, Philip, I'm sure this might be the first conversation that we have. I'm very sure it's not going to be the last conversation that we have as we draw the attention of our listeners to what is happening on the ground. And so thank you for sharing with us this morning, and thank you for the good fight that you are fighting on behalf of so many of us.
Thanks, Dept.
Thanks so much.
Isikhululo sakho senkuthazo.
Your inspiration station, Kingfisher FM.